Late at night, the neon light from the street cast a dim glow across the windows of a small bakery called Maple and Soul. Inside the shop was empty, filled only with the hum of the air conditioner and the lingering scent of roasted coffee. Grace Miller, the young owner, was tidying up the last of the tables. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, yet her heart held a soft relief that the long day had finally come to an end. The sudden ring of the telephone shattered the silence. On the other end came the cheerful, rapid voice of Megan, her childhood best friend. "Grace, don't forget, tomorrow is my big day. Make sure you bring the invitation. I sent it already. You should get it by morning." Grace laughed, her tired, flour-smudged face lighting up with ease. "Don't worry. I'll wear my prettiest dress. I promise I won't embarrass you." After hanging up, Grace's eyes fell on a white envelope lying quietly on the counter. Her name was scribbled across the corner. Without even checking inside, she nodded to herself. This must be Megan's invitation. Her mind buzzing with plans for tomorrow, she slipped the envelope into her purse, locked up the shop, and returned to her small apartment. The next morning, May sunlight poured through her tiny bedroom window, filling the room with a crystalline glow. Standing before the mirror, Grace lifted her sky blue dress. The loveliest one in her closet, the only thing that made her feel as though she belonged to a more glamorous world. She braided her hair, neatly dabbed a touch of pink lipstick, and whispered to her reflection, "Megan's wedding day. I have to look my best." Just before leaving, she fished the envelope from her bag to confirm the location. Her eyes skimmed only the last line, Grand Oak Hotel, Ballroom A. That was enough. She folded it back and hurried to catch a taxi. When the car stopped, Grace stepped out and gazed at the luxurious hotel. Its glass facade glittered like it was bathed in gold beneath the noon sun. A line of luxury cars stretched before the entrance, and a red carpet unfurled like a royal path. Staring wide-eyed, she thought, "My God, Megan, you really kept this a secret. I never imagined your wedding would be this extravagant." Walking past the glass doors, she felt as if she had wandered into another world. Elegant ladies in shimmering gowns, distinguished gentlemen in polished tuxedos, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the drifting perfume of roses in the air. She bit her lip and glanced down at her simple dress, a sharp pang of smallness curling inside her. Suddenly, the music cut out. The host's voice rang through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the bride and groom, Sophia and Daniel." The thunderous applause crashed over Grace like a hammer blow. She froze. Sophia Daniel. Not Megan. Not a single familiar name. Her trembling hands snatched the envelope from her purse, and this time her eyes locked on the very first line. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Sophia and Daniel." Her heart plummeted straight into the abyss. She had grabbed the wrong invitation. Cold sweat trickled down her spine as her body turned rigid like stone. In that instant, only one thought screamed through her mind. "I have to get out of here, right now." She shot up from her chair, clutching the crumpled invitation in her hand. But the moment she turned toward the exit, hundreds of curious eyes fell upon the stranger in the modest blue dress. And then she felt it, that chill slicing straight down her spine. At the far end of the banquet table, beneath the glitter of a crystal chandelier, a tall man in a black tuxedo stood, a glass of wine swirling in his hand. His dark, piercing eyes seemed to strip away every secret. His gaze left Grace breathless. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, then curved his lips into a cool, knowing smile, as if he had already uncovered everything, as if Grace's foolish mistake was the very twist of fate he had been waiting for. Inside her chest, her heartbeat hammered wildly, painfully. Her palm fumbled for the glass door handle, but before she could escape, a low, resonant voice rolled from just behind her, not loud, yet powerful enough to shatter her world. Leaving so soon, Grace spun around. Her eyes met the icy depths of the man's gaze. Ethan Carter, the young CEO whose name every corner of the city knew. And in that moment, the entire room blurred away. Only his searing eyes remained colliding with her trembling heart. She had no idea that this small mistake had just hurled her into a whirlwind of fate, one that would change everything forever. The banquet hall glowed like a sky full of stars, but to Grace every light felt like a weapon aimed directly at her. Her heart pounded so fast it might burst when the man's hand tightened gently yet firmly around her slender wrist. Ethan Carter. The name flared in her memory, echoing all the articles she'd read about the brilliant young businessman, cold, calculating, always holding the upper hand. They said his eyes were icy enough to make rivals tremble, his composure, regal like a king secure on his throne. And now those very eyes were locked solely on her, not with disdain, not with indifference, but with a strange, unsettling interest that made her pulse stumble. I've made a mistake. I shouldn't be here, Grace whispered, her voice nearly swallowed by the music, yet her gaze couldn't escape the sharp intensity of his. Ethan leaned closer, his breath brushing past her cheek, his dark eyes pulling her in. If you leave right now, his voice was low, steady as steel, you'll only feed their curiosity. Sit beside me. It's the only way out of this. Grace's eyes widened, her chest tightening. She shook her head, fumbling for words. I don't even know who you are. Please let me go. But he didn't let go. His strong hand still held her wrist, not harshly, but with a quiet insistence. His gaze bore into her, not forceful, but weighted enough to steal her breath. Then, in a voice that left no room for argument, he spoke slowly, each word, landing like a command. Sit beside me. Around them murmurs swelled. Curious glances darted toward the stranger in the modest blue dress. The harder Grace tried to vanish, the more out of place she became in this world of glitter. And so, caught in the pressure of the moment, she let Ethan guide her to the head table, where the brightest light sought to expose every move. She sat, hands trembling in her lap. Before her, the red wine shimmered under the chandeliers, but she dared not touch it. Ethan sat beside her with calm ease, as though every detail had been calculated in advance. Why are you doing this? She leaned toward him, whispering in frantic confusion. He turned his head, his voice, even his gaze steady. If you stand alone, you'll be ridiculed, but if you sit with me, they'll see you differently. Grace's throat tightened. She knew she was no one, just the owner of a tiny bakery more familiar with flour and ovens than champagne and diamonds. And yet, in that instant, she felt the shift. The stares around the table no longer mocked. They burned with envy, with speculation, with wariness. What's your name? Ethan suddenly asked, his voice unhurried, deliberate. She blinked. Grace. He repeated it softly, as if savoring each syllable. Grace. Short, easy to remember. His eyes stayed fixed on her, cool, but carrying a faint, unreadable spark. Grace dropped her gaze, trying to avoid him. But every time she looked up, she found those dark eyes waiting. Every gesture he made, the tilt of his glass, the relaxed lean of his shoulders, the way his eyes swept across the room, left her wound tight, breathless. The music surged again as the bride and groom entered. Applause thundered. Grace clapped awkwardly, her mind spinning. She heard nothing, felt nothing, only the warmth of the man beside her. Then suddenly he leaned close, his breath grazing her ear. If you truly want to leave, wait until all eyes are on the couple. I'll take you out. Grace startled, catching the glint of mischief flickering in his eyes, as if he were daring her courage. Part of her longed to break free and run, but another part, one she couldn't explain, was drawn toward the strange gravity of this man. And in that moment, the whispers ignited, spreading through the hall like fire catching dry straw. Who is she? Who's sitting next to Ethan Carter? My God, he's never brought anyone to a wedding before. That dress, clearly not from high society. Grace bit her lip, gripping the hem of her dress to hide her trembling hands. But denial was no longer possible. She had become the center of a rumor she couldn't control. Meanwhile, Ethan sat steady, his eyes sweeping the room utterly unbothered, as if he himself had sparked the storm and intended to let it blaze even brighter. And Grace realized from the very moment she stepped into that hall, her life had veered down a path she never chose. A path with no return. The music in the hall softened, drifting into tender notes, like summer breezes through trees. Violins sang, drawing every gaze to the wide dance floor, awaiting lovers to step forward. The crystal chandeliers scattered light into 1,000 shimmering threads, turning the room into a glittering night sky. Grace sat frozen in her silk-covered chair, her fingers laced so tightly it felt as though, if she let go, she might vanish into the crowd of light. She wished she could be invisible. But the most unexpected thing happened. The man beside her rose. His tall frame cast a shadow over her, his deep eyes tilting down, pulling her entire world into their gravity. "Come with me," Ethan Carter's voice rumbled. Not an order, but a gentle invitation spoken amid the hum of whispers. Grace startled, her lips parting. I don't know how to dance." The corner of Ethan's mouth curved a rare smile, softening his usual frost. "That's all right. Just put your hand in mine. The rest, let me lead." Her heart swayed wildly. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward them. If she refused, the scrutiny would only sharpen. In the span of a breath, she slipped her trembling hand into his. The lights poured down, making her simple blue dress flow, with an odd kind of beauty against the ocean of jeweled gowns. Ethan placed one hand lightly at her waist, steady, and sure the other lifting her hand. His warmth seeped into her skin, coloring her cheeks a faint rose. The music swelled. Her first step was clumsy, nearly treading on his shoes. "I'm sorry. I told you I can't." A soft chuckle slipped from him. For the first time she heard that sound from Ethan. Not cold, but warmly disarming. "Don't worry, I'll guide you." Step by step, turn by turn, Ethan drew her into rhythm. At first she stumbled awkward and hesitant, but soon her body moved in time with his sure lead. To her shock, beneath the chandeliers, they looked no different from lovers. And then the ripples of whispers stirred. "Carter has never danced with anyone before." "Who is she? I've never seen her face." Strange as eyes tonight. They're different. Every hushed word pricked at Grace like tiny needles. She wanted to protest, to shout that she was no one, just a girl who grabbed the wrong invitation. But Ethan's gaze held her captive, cold, mysterious, yet lit with something she couldn't name. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling within the melody. Doing what Ethan tilted his head, his breath grazing her ear. "Bringing me here, letting everyone misunderstand me." A pause. Then his answer fell calm, yet sharp. "And what's so wrong if they believe it?" Grace's breath caught her chest, jolting as though touched by lightning. His eyes were steady, his expression unshaken, as if this had been his design all along. Just as the music lingered on a dreamlike note, a new presence entered. Eleanor Carter, her silver hair neat, her petite frame radiating strength, her eyes sharp as a seasoned blade, walked with a cane into the center of the hall. She needed no introduction. Everyone knew her, the one person Ethan truly respected, the one who could make the cold CEO bow. Her gaze swept the ballroom before resting on the pair, turning slowly to the waltz. A smile curved her lips, playful yet layered with meaning. Her voice cut through the solemn air. "Ethan, at last you brought your girlfriend to meet me." Grace stumbled mid-step. The world tilted. Her cheeks flamed as she shook her head, her words spilling in panic. "No, I'm not." But Ethan said nothing. He did not correct her. He did not laugh it off. He did not rush to explain as any ordinary man would. Instead, he tightened his hand around Grace's, not restraining, but steadying. His grasp was an unspoken promise. His eyes, dark and unwavering, met his grandmother's, then flicked briefly to the countless onlookers. Slowly, deliberately, his lips curved. A wordless declaration. "Yes, she's mine." The ballroom erupted. Shock, excitement, disbelief. What's going on? Ethan Carter not denying it. He's never done this for anyone. Yet Ethan remained silent. Grace's throat closed. She couldn't understand why he let the misunderstanding spread. Was it courtesy to save Eleanor's pride, or something else? She had never seen him like this. No defenses, no evasions, no explanations. Just standing there with her in the blaze of whispers, as though he himself had lit the fire. The music ended. Ethan bowed like a gentleman of another century, his eyes never leaving hers. He offered his hand, leading her from the dance floor through the glow of candles, past every curious gaze. Grace walked beside him, mute, her heart thrashing with one burning question. Why didn't you deny it? What she didn't know was that his silence was deliberate, not confusion, not hesitation. The truth was, Ethan had noticed her from the beginning. Not at first sight, perhaps. Her simple dress, her unfamiliar face, her cautious eyes could have blended with any stranger. But it was the way she entered, without arrogance, without pretense, pausing at the threshold, as if she'd wandered into foreign land. Her eyes, so startlingly honest, that made him look again. He thought she was with someone. But then she drifted toward the family's table, frowned, and tried to leave quietly. Something stirred inside him then. Not mere curiosity, not fleeting interest, but a strange instinct as though, if he let her walk away, he would lose something vital. So he rose, and when he saw her hurrying, her dress fluttering lightly, her face turned away, he spoke. The words came unplanned, yet they began everything. And when Eleanor, the one who knew him best, called her girlfriend, he knew he had two choices: deny it and cast Grace back into the pit of suspicion, or stand beside her, if only as a shield. He chose, and his silence became his answer. Grace didn't know, not yet. She didn't know that this storm was not chance, but perhaps destiny itself, because the man thought to be made of ice had unknowingly begun to melt. As the final waltz faded, Grace slipped her hand away, bowing slightly in thanks before stepping back. Her lips fumbled still, unable to shape words to answer Eleanor's remark. For a fleeting moment, Ethan thought to hold her there, just 1 second longer. But her eyes shut like a door slammed too quickly. If she stayed another breath, everything might shatter. She left the ballroom in silence. No one noticed, no one stopped her, not even Ethan. He remained where he was standing alone on the empty dance floor. Applause music whispers, all blurred into background haze. Grace's figure dissolved into the shadows of the corridor, swift as her arrival. And suddenly, for the first time, Ethan felt hollow in the brilliance of a room overflowing with light. Her footsteps echoed faintly across marble, while inside she was chaos. Not from shame, but from a question haunting her. Who am I in this story? A storm centerpiece, an intruder in high society, or simply a girl who picked up the wrong invitation? Out on the street, night air brushed into her thin dress. Street lamps glowed, gold. Strangers laughed in passing, and the city pulsed forward, utterly indifferent to the heart, just caught in a game it never signed up for. Grace halted at the curb, digging out her phone. The screen lit her face. A new message blinked from Megan, each line striking harder than the last. "Where are you?" "The ceremony started, you idiot. Lucy said you delivered the cakes hours ago. We've been waiting forever." The words weren't just playful scolding. They hit like a slap, snapping her out of the daze. Her eyes flicked back to the invitation in her purse. She closed them tight. Fool. The card wasn't Megan's. It wasn't her best friend's wedding at all. And then it came back to her. Yesterday the bakery had taken 2 wedding orders. One was Megan's simple heartfelt. The other, a rush order placed by an assistant from some wealthy family, complete with a sample invitation for thank you cards. Between ribbons and linen bags, she had mixed them up. She had slipped the wrong envelope into her purse without even checking. One tiny mistake, and she had walked into the wrong world. And worse, she hadn't just wandered in. She had danced with Ethan Carter, been mistaken for his girlfriend, and become the spark of an entire ballroom's gossip. Grace let out a half-laugh, half-sob. Choked, bitter, absurd. Then she drew a steady breath, opened her phone, and searched for the real address. Garden View Hall, Lily Ballroom, 2nd floor. She hailed a cab, no matter how late she had to go. Megan was her best friend, and today was her wedding day. Even if just hours earlier Grace had lived through an evening that belonged to another life. The wedding reception drew to a close in a gentle murmur of laughter and farewells. The grand hall emptied, leaving white-draped tables scattered with half-full glasses of golden wine. The piano had fallen silent, and with it came a peculiar hush. Ethan Carter stood on the 2nd-floor balcony, his gaze fixed on the long corridor, where the girl in the blue dress had just disappeared. Her figure, bathed in amber light, grew smaller, smaller, until the night swallowed her whole. He lifted his glass, though the wine had never once touched his lips all evening. He should have returned to the tables, shaken hands with partners, exchanged polite remarks. But tonight those rituals felt like dead weight. His mind circled a single question. Who is she? A girl who stumbled into high society, awkward in the waltz, yet her eyes shone so purely it had shaken him. He had never encountered such a gaze. Without ambition, without calculation. For years all he'd known were eyes sharp as daggers, or sweet with false sugar. But hers was a stream of clear water flowing into a barren desert. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of his office, painting warm lines across the dark wood desk. Ethan sat there since dawn, untouched coffee cooling by his elbow. Important reports piled high, unopened. His mind replayed her face, the way her trembling hand gripped his with such stubbornness, the shy yet tender smile, the tilt of her head when she tried to follow his lead in the dance. By noon, Eleanor appeared as she often did to remind her grandson to eat. Her silver hair was swept into its usual bun, her eyes still bright with the authority of a woman who had lived much and seen more. "You've never once led anyone to the dance floor," she said, slowly setting her teacup down. Her gaze pinned him with knowing weight. "That girl, she changed you. I could see it." Ethan said nothing, but his hand clenched slightly against the desk. A mischievous smile touched Eleanor's lips. "I don't care who she is. What matters is that, with her, your eyes lost some of their coldness." Her words pierced straight through the one place he guarded most. He didn't deny it. His silence itself was confession. That very afternoon, Ethan summoned Marcus, his trusted aide. "There's a woman." His voice was low, his eyes fixed ahead, as if afraid that if he blinked her image might slip away. "She wasn't on the guest list, but I need to know who she is. Find her. I want everything." Marcus hesitated. This was the first time he had ever heard such a request from his boss about a woman, but he only nodded. He knew this wasn't a whim. A day later, the report lay on Ethan's desk. He opened it, just a few pages, a handful of lines. Grace Miller, owner of a small bakery named Maple and Soul, located in the Old Quarter. Customer reviews scribbled in margins. Her cakes are sweet, gentle, like the smile of the girl behind the counter. He stared at the name, Grace Miller. He whispered it slow and deliberate, as if carving it into memory. And inside his chest, he felt a certainty he could not let her vanish, not allow her brief appearance to dissolve like a passing shadow. Lifting his eyes, his voice hardened with resolve. "Prepare the car. I want to go there. Today." Afternoon sunlight slanted through city trees, scattering gold across a quiet street. The car stopped in front of a modest shop with a wooden sign, Maple and Soul, coffee and baked with heart. No grandeur, no glitter, just a corner of peace carved from a rushing world. Ethan stepped out, walked slowly to the glass door. Inside, Grace was bent over a fresh tray of pastries, hair tied back a few strands slipping loose to frame her tired but gentle face. He pushed open the door. The soft jingle of wind chimes rang. Grace looked up, startled, recognizing him at once. Their eyes met, not under chandeliers or forced music, but here in a small space filled with the scent of flour and coffee. Ethan inclined his head, his voice deeper and gentler than ever before. "A cappuccino, please. A cinnamon roll, and if possible, a little of your time." Grace faltered, flustered, then nodded. She turned to prepare his order, her heart pounding wildly. Ethan sat down at the old wooden table, and for the first time in his life, he felt something rare. Peace. From that day on, something shifted. The man who commanded empires now found himself drawn to a little bakery, only to see the smile of a simple girl. And in that moment, their story began to take root. In the days that followed, the small space of Maple and Soul grew accustomed to a most unusual guest. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, polished shoes, utterly mismatched with the shop's worn wooden floorboards. Yet there he was, day after day, always settling into the corner seat by the window. At first, Grace assumed it was coincidence that he had simply dropped by once and wouldn't return. But when his shadow appeared again and again and again, a peculiar flutter began to stir inside her. He never came with the air of a CEO, no bodyguards, no assistants, just himself, quiet, contemplative, with simple gestures. Sometimes he opened his laptop, sometimes he leafed through a newspaper, but most often he simply sat in stillness, as if listening for the wind chimes on the door or the faint clink of spoons against porcelain. Grace tried to keep her distance. She brewed coffee-cleared tables, chatted with regulars, pretending not to notice that his eyes often lingered on her longer than necessary. Yet every time his gaze brushed against her, her heart stumbled, her hands fumbled, spoons clattered, milk spilled. One afternoon, while pouring milk foam, she accidentally shaped a crooked heart on a cappuccino. Flustered, she muttered, "I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this. It was supposed to be perfect." Ethan studied the misshapen heart, then lifted the cup, a faint smile playing at his lips. "I don't need a perfect heart, only one that's real, even if it's clumsy. To me, it's more beautiful than any flawless design." The simple words made Grace's chest quiver. She looked down, cheeks burning, but from that moment she knew her feelings had slipped further than she intended. Tiny memories began to bloom between them. One day she watched as Ethan bent to help Mrs. Harris, the elderly regular who always bought baguettes, carry her heavy bags to the car. Mrs. Harris beamed, clapping his arm in delight, while Grace, watching from inside, caught herself smiling softly. Another time she wobbled precariously on a wooden chair while changing a light bulb. Without a word, Ethan stepped forward, steadying the chair with one hand. When she glanced down, catching his eyes, her heart gave a small, helpless leap. Some mornings he arrived early just to sit quietly and listen to the oven's faint crackle. When Grace brought out a tray of fresh waffles, he was always the first to taste. His verdict was the same each time, just a brief nod, a simple good. But the way he ate, unhurried and attentive, made Grace feel that every effort of hers truly mattered. Still, a question gnawed at her. One late evening when the shop was nearly empty, she gathered her courage. Why do you keep coming here? You could drink coffee anywhere, at places more luxurious, more fitting for someone like you. Ethan set his cup down, his eyes lifting to hers, voice low and deliberate. Because here, I find what I need. Anywhere else, I just drink coffee. But here, I find peace. Grace's throat caught. Such a simple word. Peace. Yet it made her heart tremble. Gradually, she stopped resisting his presence. She grew used to looking up and finding him there. She grew used to his reflection in the window glass each morning. She grew used to the chime of the door, announcing him. Not as a CEO, but as just another man choosing her little world. One crisp autumn afternoon, she brought him a knitted scarf. This city's getting colder. If you keep sitting by the window every day, you'll catch a chill. Ethan accepted it, his eyes warming faintly. He didn't offer a formal thank you. Instead, he draped it over his shoulders and said simply, "I'll keep it." From then on, the scarf became part of him. And every time Grace saw it, her heart tightened with both warmth and fear. Their memories lengthened through small, unspoken things. A rainy morning when he held an umbrella for her across the street. A late night when he stayed after closing, helping her wipe tables in companionable silence. A time she burst into laughter watching him fumble at latte art, leaving only a messy streak of milk. He just looked at her, then his eyes glowing as though the sound of her laughter was worth the failure. Little by little, those moments chipped away at the walls between them. The powerful CEO and the humble cafe owner. And Grace, though afraid to admit it, knew the truth. She was falling. Yet with closeness came fear. She dreaded this was temporary. She dreaded the gaze of the press might someday pierce her sanctuary. One evening she dared to ask, her voice trembling, "Are you sure? You want to step into my little world? I'm not the kind of woman who belongs beside you. I'm not like them." Ethan stood across the space to her, his eyes steady but tender. "Exactly. You're not like them. You're you." The words broke something inside her, chains she hadn't realized she carried. She couldn't answer aloud, but the tearful smile trembling on her lips spoke for her. Then, on a chilly morning, Ethan surprised her with an invitation. "There's a charity gala this weekend. I want you to come with me." Grace's breath caught, lights, cameras, whispers. All her old fears surged back. But his eyes calm and sincere held hers as he added, "Not for anyone else. I just want you to see a little more of my world, beyond what you've imagined." She hesitated, then nodded. Her heart told her it was time to trust. And with that one nod, their story opened a new chapter. One of faith, of trials, and of a love beginning to bloom in both the light and the shadows. Saturday afternoon, the city sky stretched clear and blue autumn sunlight, gilding the towers in gold. Grace stood before her small mirror, hands trembling as she adjusted the strap of an ivory dress she seldom wore. The reflection staring back carried a quiet dread. She wasn't used to such splendor. Her life had always been defined by the scent of flour, the ping of the oven, the wooden chairs of maple and sole. But Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "Not for anyone else. I just want you to see a little more of my world." That single thread of promise tugged her heart across the threshold of fear. A black car pulled up outside her apartment. Ethan emerged tall and commanding in a classic black tuxedo. When his eyes landed on Grace, his usual coldness warmed for a fleeting instant. He walked forward, opened the car door, and said softly, "You look beautiful." Grace blushed, lowering her gaze. "I've never been to a place like this. I just hope I won't embarrass you." Ethan shook his head, his voice firm, steady. Walking beside you, I've never been prouder. Her eyes shimmered damp with emotion, brighter than any light that awaited them. The charity gala felt like another universe. Chandeliers blazed velvet walls, glowed deep red violins, weaved a silken hush. Men and women in gowns and tuxedos mingled with practiced grace, champagne glasses glittering in their hands. Grace clutched the edge of her dress, dwarfed by grandeur. Sensing it, Ethan leaned down his breath, a calm reassurance. Don't be afraid, just walk with me. I'll handle the rest. His hand rested firmly at her back, guiding her through the glittering sea. And strangely, each step beside him quieted her fear, as if his presence alone dimmed the power of all other eyes. When the program began, Ethan stepped onto the stage. Beneath the golden spotlight, he was no longer the icy CEO splashed across newspapers. Instead, he spoke with warmth that filled every corner of the hall. We're not just donating money tonight, his voice resonated low and steady. We're giving hope. Every hand we extend is a flame, lighting the dawn for lives still waiting for morning. The room fell silent. Grace watched him, her heart quivering. She had never seen him like this. Not commanding, not calculating, but human, raw, generous. After the speech, Ethan led her to an exhibit lining the hall. Photographs of orphaned children, fragile shelters, and smiling faces, despite hardship, stared back at her. Grace's throat tightened as she took them in. Ethan's voice softened at her side. I never starved, never froze. But there were years I felt hollow, surrounded by everything yet empty inside. Maybe that's why. I want to build something that matters more than wealth. I want to use what I have to change their lives. Grace turned toward him, and for the first time, she didn't see a cold magnate. She saw a man who had once known darkness, who now reached toward light, not only for himself, but for others. You're different, she whispered. His mouth curved faintly. Different how? Her lips pressed together, heart racing. Different from everything I thought you were. Throughout the evening, she saw glimpses the world had never known. Ethan crouched to listen to a sick girl's story, pressed a toy bear into a boy's hands, clasped the frail fingers of the elderly as he promised they wouldn't be forgotten. Each moment stripped away another layer of frost, revealing the warmth hidden within. By the time the gala ended and they stepped outside, Grace felt a glow inside her that no autumn wind could dim. On the ride home, the city blurred past the car windows like a galaxy rushing by. Grace leaned her head against the glass, her heart overflowing. Tonight, she had crossed a threshold she hadn't thought possible. She had seen his true self, and in that revelation she realized, perhaps fate had not been wrong to send her to that mistaken wedding. When the car stopped outside Maple and Soul, Ethan turned his voice quiet but steady. Grace, thank you for being with me tonight. She smiled, eyes shining as she shook her head. No, I should be the one thanking you. They held each other's gaze in silence, no words needed. That moment alone said enough the space between them had grown smaller. That gala wasn't just an event, it was a bridge, a key. The moment Grace unlocked a truth she could never forget, Ethan Carter was not merely a cold CEO, he was a man capable of touching her soul. The next morning, Grace opened Maple and Soul as usual. The sky was still drowsy autumn winds carrying a crisp chill. She expected the day to be peaceful, regular customers steaming cappuccinos, trays of fresh pastries. But within minutes she realized peace had abandoned her. The wooden door creaked open, and a blinding flash exploded in her face. Then another and another. Cameras, phones, microphones shoved forward like weapons. Voices crashed against her from all sides. Are you Ethan Carter's girlfriend? When did you meet him? Was it at the wedding? You were seen with him at the charity gala last night. Are you two dating? Grace froze, the open sign still clutched in her hand. Her breath quickened, heart hammering. She stumbled backward, forcing out words that trembled. Please, go away. This is just a small bakery. None of what you're saying has anything to do with us. But the crowd surged closer, hungry for more. A reporter thrust a morning paper toward her. Splashed across the front page, a modern Cinderella, humble bakery owner, captures billionaire Ethan Carter's heart. Beneath a photo of her walking hand in hand beside Ethan at the gala, another voice sneered, Is Carter bankrolling this bakery? Just another PR stunt, isn't it? Grace's body shook. Her fists tightened around her apron, her lips dry and helpless. She no longer knew how to answer. To them, she wasn't a person, just today's juicy headline. The little shop once her sanctuary now felt violated under the glare of cameras. Regular customers hesitated at the doorway, then turned away afraid of being dragged into the frenzy. Mrs. Harris, the elderly woman who always bought baguettes, tried to push through the mob, compassion in her eyes. Her frail hand pressed to the glass, as if to whisper comfort. But the crowd shoved her back, sweeping her away before she could speak. Grace stood behind the counter, clutching her apron like it was the last fragment of safety. A camera lens thrust close to her face. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She only whispered, her voice breaking into air. "Please don't destroy this place." No one listened. She shut the door, yanked the curtains down, shutting the world out. Then she sank to the floor, covering her face with her hands. Tears slid silently into her palms, soaking the fabric. Inside the room, that once felt like home, she had never felt so unbearably alone. By late afternoon, Maple and Soul was hushed, as though even the walls shared her exhaustion. Half-prepared pastries sat abandoned on the counter, butter and flour drying under weak yellow light. Grace hunched over her back, curved small and fragile, as if trying to make herself invisible. Outside, shadows loomed. A few reporters still lingered, not shouting now, just waiting, like vultures patient for their prey. She had poured her heart into this place. Every loaf, every latte, heart, every painting she'd hung by the window. And now, it all felt exposed, trampled under scrutiny. She wasn't afraid of cameras. She was afraid of how the world would see her now as a schemer, a gold digger, just another scandal on Ethan Carter's long list. But deeper still, she feared one thing most, that she wasn't enough to stand beside him. Then, 3 knocks on the door. Not pounding, not urgent. 3 slow, steady knocks that sent a shiver through her chest. Grace froze. She didn't want to look, but her eyes betrayed her peeking through the slit of the curtain. Bathed in the last light of the day, a tall figure stood quietly unmoving, not calling her name, just waiting. "Ethan!" He didn't knock again. He didn't leave. He simply stood there. Grace closed her eyes, her hand trembling on the latch. Not from anger, but from fear. If she opened the door, what would he bring? An explanation? A farewell? Or something she couldn't even hope for? Still, she turned the key. Slowly, Ethan stepped inside. Alone, no cameras, no entourage. Just him, with eyes deep as midnight, bare, unguarded. Grace stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself, as if to shield what was left. Her eyes asked the question her lips couldn't. "Why are you here?" Ethan didn't rush to answer. He glanced around the shop, the candy jars, the chalkboard menu, the low-hanging lights glowing against her shoulders. None of it belonged to his world of skyscrapers and boardrooms. Yet, he wanted to be here, not as a CEO, but as a man learning how to move gently in someone else's life. Then his gaze settled on her. No apologies, no excuses. Just an unspoken truth. "I see you. I understand." Grace turned away, her voice breaking. "All I wanted was for this place to be safe, a little corner to breathe, to live. But now, it's all crumbling. They look at me like a joke, and they look at you as if I don't belong at your side." Her shoulders trembled, not from pride, but from having nowhere left to stand. Ethan moved closer, not too near, just enough. His voice came low, deliberate like a vow. "I'm not here to justify anything. I'm here because from this moment, anyone who wants to hurt you will have to get through me first." Grace's tear-streaked eyes lifted. For the first time, she saw not the ruthless glare of a tycoon, but the steady light of a man willing to stand beside her when the world turned away. He reached out his hand, not commanding, not dragging, just waiting. She stared at it for a long, trembling moment, then placed her hand in his. Silence fell, but in that silence every barrier dissolved. Ethan bowed his head, his forehead brushing hers. He didn't kiss her immediately, just stayed close enough that their breaths mingled enough to calm her breaking heart. And when she didn't pull away, he finally kissed her, gentle, sincere, unhurried. It didn't erase her fears, but in his warmth, those fears no longer mattered. Grace closed her eyes, melting into it, for the first time, not feeling alone. Outside, reporters still lurked, but inside, another world had opened, one where she no longer ran and he no longer hid. As night settled fully, they sat together, hands entwined, whispering to the universe. We will stay together. A soft winter afternoon draped the city in golden calm as the black car rolled down a cobblestone lane toward the Carter family's grand estate. In the back seat, Grace sat beside Ethan, her palms damp where their hands were laced together. "I really don't know if I belong here," she whispered, her eyes lowered, heart racing. Ethan turned his gaze steady, his voice deep and reassuring. "You don't have to be certain. Just be yourself. She'll love you the same way I already." He stopped the confession unfinished, but his hand tightened around hers with quiet strength, filling the silence with promise. The iron gates swung open, revealing a winter garden, alive with blooming roses. On the porch, Eleanor Carter stood waiting. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her sharp eyes softened by a warm smile. When Grace stepped out of the car, Eleanor's face lit up. There was no scrutiny in her eyes, no cold judgment. Only the gentle welcome of a grandmother embracing a long-lost granddaughter. "You must be Grace Eleanor," said her voice clear despite the years. Grace bowed her head shyly. "Yes, it's an honor to meet you." Eleanor moved forward without hesitation, taking Grace's hand in her own, aged but still warm. "You're even lovelier than I imagined. But beauty isn't what I wanted to see. It's the way you look at Ethan that matters most." Grace flushed crimson, stunned by the words. Eleanor chuckled softly, tugging her inside, while Ethan lingered behind, his eyes filled with pride and gratitude at the scene unfolding. Dinner was held not in some glittering banquet hall, but in the wide, cozy kitchen, lit by amber lamps and filled with the scent of chicken soup. No gold-plated cutlery, no champagne towers, only hearty food and homely conversation. Grace sat beside Eleanor, listening as she recounted stories of Ethan's childhood, of a mischievous boy climbing trees for apples, of hiding his music sheets to avoid piano lessons. Across the table, Ethan smiled, rare and unguarded, his eyes softened by memory. Grace's laughter spilled out light and musical, bridging every distance. For the first time, she felt she belonged here, not because of titles or wealth, but because her heart was welcomed. Midway through the meal, Eleanor suddenly set down her spoon, her gaze sharp but affectionate as she looked between them. "So, when do I get to attend the wedding?" The question froze Grace. Her spoon nearly slipped from her fingers, her cheeks flaming hot. She stammered, We've only just..." But Ethan didn't let her finish. Beneath the table, his hand covered hers, steady and sure. He looked directly at Eleanor, his voice unwavering. "We won't lose each other. As soon as Grace says yes, I'm ready." The kitchen fell quiet for a heartbeat. Then Eleanor's face broke into a radiant smile, her eyes glistening. "Good, very good." Grace glanced at Ethan, stunned. There was not a trace of doubt in his gaze, and within her own heart, the fear began to dissolve, replaced by something new, something certain. A month later, on a frosty morning, Grace was polishing the wooden counter at Maple and Soul when the chime of the door rang. She looked up. Ethan stood there, not in a suit but in a simple white shirt. In his hand, a cream-colored envelope. He walked to the counter and placed it down. "Do you remember how everything began with the wrong invitation?" Grace's heart squeezed as she lifted her eyes to his. Ethan smiled, opening the envelope. Inside was a handwritten card. "You are cordially invited, Grace Miller, to be my bride." Her vision blurred with tears. He pulled out a small velvet box, flipped it open, revealing a ring that gleamed like starlight. "Grace," his voice trembled slightly, though his gaze was resolute, "you came into my life through a mistake, but you are the one thing that's right. Will you marry me?" Grace laughed through her tears, nodding as they spilled freely. "You're a fool, but yes, I will." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, his own hand shaking. But for the first time, his world felt unshakably certain. That spring, the little garden behind Maple and Soul bloomed in wildflowers. Strings of golden lights hung from the trees. Daisies lined the aisle. No red carpet, no grandeur. Only a circle of close friends, loyal customers, and Eleanor sitting proudly in the front row, her smile radiant. Grace walked in a simple dress crowned with wildflowers. Ethan in a deep navy suit, his eyes alight with devotion. When their hands joined the garden, hushed as though the universe itself leaned in, Ethan's vow rang low and steady. I promise to love you in light and in shadow, in clamor and in silence. You may have come to me by mistake, but you are the truest gift fate has ever given me. Grace's voice trembled, her tears glistening. And I promise to hold your hand even when my heart feels clumsy. Our love may not be perfect, but it is real. Applause rippled. Laughter mingled with tears. They kissed beneath the twinkling lights like stars falling into their garden. A mistake had become the beginning of forever. That night, when the guests had gone, Grace sat on the shop's porch, her wedding gown still dusted with petals. Ethan draped his coat over her shoulders and whispered, "From now on, Maple and Soul isn't just your cafe. It's our home." Grace leaned against him, eyes closed, smiling. And she knew fate had chosen right. No one could have predicted what a wrong invitation would bring. But for Grace, that tiny mistake opened an entire world. Not one of wealth or glitter, but of sincerity of hearts that listened and hands that held fast in the storm. She had once feared she wasn't enough for a man like Ethan. But love, she learned, doesn't measure or judge. It arrives like the evening sun on the porch, quiet, gentle, impossible to refuse. Ethan never needed perfection. He needed someone real, someone unafraid to be vulnerable, someone who still believed in goodness, someone like Grace. And in his eyes, Grace finally saw herself. Not a lonely baker in a small shop, but a woman worthy of love, of being chosen, of building a new journey. A journey born of a mistake, but ending in the truest right of all. A love that didn't need to be perfect, only true.